I used to believe my home was perfect. We weren't rich, but we had what mattered. My father was a doctor, always leaving the house in a crisp white coat, his stethoscope around his neck. My mother worked as a secretary. She tied her scarf neatly each morning, kissed my forehead, and hurried off to work with a smile. My older brother and I would wave as they left, the smell of Mama's cooking still lingering in the air. We prayed together, shared meals together, and celebrated Eid with joy. Baba sometimes came home with small gifts, nothing big but enough to make me feel special. On Fridays, Mama cooked her special rice. The smell filled the house and made it feel safe. As a child, I thought happiness was permanent. I thought our lives would always stay this way. But I didn't see the small cracks that were forming. I didn't notice Baba's tone growing sharper, or Mama's smile fading just a little too quickly. I didn't know there were whispers between them late at night when they thought we were asleep. At 6 years old, I didn't understand that sometimes the loudest warning signs are silent. One evening, I noticed Baba looking out of the window for a long time. Mama stood in the kitchen, her hands still but her eyes wet. I didn't ask why. Children often sense trouble before they can explain it. And just like that, the laughter in our home began to fade. The change didn't come all at once. It started like a soft wind, slowly building into a storm. There were more arguments. Not shouting, but low, tense voices behind closed doors. Baba spent longer at work. Mama stared into space sometimes while cooking. One day, I overheard words I didn't fully understand. Second wife. I didn't know what that meant for my family, but I knew from Mama's face that it wasn't good. Her voice trembled when she spoke to Baba, but he looked away. Then one evening the decision was made. My brother and I would be leaving. We weren't going to live with Mama anymore. We weren't going to stay with Baba either. We were being sent to relatives in another state. I remember my small bag being packed quickly. My brother tried to stay calm, but I could see the worry in his eyes. I clutched a small doll Mama had bought me for Eid. I didn't know when I would see her again. That night, Baba drove us through dark roads. The hum of the car was the only sound. I wanted to ask why, but my voice wouldn't come out. When we arrived, the house looked strange, older and quieter than ours. A woman I barely knew greeted us with a smile that didn't feel warm. My brother and I stepped inside, carrying only our bags, and the sound of our home breaking behind us. The first night in the new house felt heavy. It didn't smell like home. The air felt different, thicker, almost unfriendly. My aunt, the woman who would now care for us, showed us a small room. 2 thin mattresses lay on the floor. She gave us a list of rules before we even had time to sit down. No talking back, no wasting food, no playing outside without permission. The next morning, chores began before sunrise. My brother and I fetched water, swept floors, and washed dishes before breakfast. There was no gentle good morning, no warm hugs. I missed Mama's soft hand waking me for school. I missed Baba's stories at night. I missed feeling like a child. Food was different here. Smaller portions, no second helpings. Some nights we went to bed hungry. But hunger wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was the emptiness, the kind that no meal could fill. And then I met her. She was my older cousin. Her name was Samira. She was in her late teens, confident, and always laughing. She treated me differently from the others. She gave me sweets in secret, sat close to me during family gatherings, and whispered things no one else could hear. At first, I thought it was kindness. I thought she liked me. I had no idea she was about to change my life forever. Samira started spending more time with me. She told me I was her favorite cousin. She played with my hair, asked about my day, and told me secrets about her friends. One afternoon she called me to her room. "Let's play a special game," she said. Her voice was playful, but she locked the door behind me. The game was strange. She touched me in ways I didn't understand. She told me not to tell anyone. She said this was our little secret. I was only 10 years old. I didn't know about right or wrong in that way. I didn't know what this meant. I only knew she was older, and I was supposed to listen. The next day, she called me again. The same thing happened. It became a routine. She would smile at me in public, then find me when no one was around. Sometimes she gave me sweets afterward, as if that made it okay. I didn't understand the words for what was happening. I didn't even think about stopping it. It was just what we did now. Days turned into weeks into months. Samira's games became part of my life. She always reminded me to keep it a secret. No one will understand, she would say. They'll think you're bad. I started to believe her. I still did my chores, went to school, and played outside with my brother. But inside, I was confused. Sometimes when I prayed, I wondered if Allah could see what we were doing. I wondered if He thought I was bad. But I pushed those thoughts away. No one else seemed to care. No one noticed anything was wrong, so I stayed silent. Looking back now, I wish someone had seen through my smile. I wish someone had asked me the right questions. I wish I had known that what was happening to me was not normal, and never okay. Eid had always been my favorite time of the year. Back home, Mama would wake us early. The house smelled like fresh bread and sweet rice. She would dress me in a new outfit, smooth my hair, and kiss my cheeks before we went for Eid prayer. Baba would smile, proud, holding my hand tightly as we walked to the masjid. But this Eid was different. I woke up in my aunt's house to no smell of fresh food, no new clothes. She gave me a dress that was too tight, clearly passed down from someone else. My brother wore trousers that looked like they belonged to another boy. At the prayer ground, I saw other children running around in new shoes, holding small envelopes of Eid money. My chest ached when I thought of Mama. I wondered if she was also at a prayer ground somewhere thinking of me. After the prayer, my aunt took us home. No one visited. No special meal was made. We ate plain rice and stew. The day felt empty. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat in the corner of our small room. My brother sat beside me silently. Neither of us said it out loud, but I knew we were thinking the same thing. Why did they send us away? My brother and I were close. In those early years away from home, we leaned on each other for comfort. He was older, stronger, and always tried to protect me. But I noticed something growing inside him. A quiet, heavy anger. He didn't shout much, he didn't cry, but I could see it in the way his eyes hardened, in how his jaw tightened when my aunt scolded me. Sometimes I would see him sitting outside alone, staring into the distance. He barely spoke to anyone in the house. When I asked him what was wrong, he would shrug and change the subject. One evening I heard raised voices in the next room. My brother's voice, sharper than I had ever heard it. "We don't belong here," he shouted. My aunt's reply came cold and quick. "Be grateful you have a roof over your head." That night he came into our small room and sat next to me on the bed. He didn't look at me, just stared at the wall. Then he said quietly, "One day, I'll take us back. You'll see, we won't be here forever." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that someone could save us. But deep down, I knew we were stuck until the adults decided otherwise. His anger never exploded in public, but I could feel it in the air between us. It was his way of surviving, holding on to that fire inside so he wouldn't break. And maybe that anger was the only thing keeping him strong enough to keep going. If I had a diary, it would have been filled with things I didn't have the courage to say out loud. I would have written about how much I missed Mama's soft voice, how I still heard it sometimes in my sleep. I would have written about Baba, not the new version who dropped us off and drove away, but the old one who used to tell bedtime stories and call me his little light. I would have written about the pain of being in a house where I felt like an outsider, where kindness was rare and smiles were suspicious. And I would have written about Samira. I would have written about the first time she touched me and how confused I felt, how I froze but didn't speak, how I thought maybe it was normal because no one ever told me otherwise, how I still didn't understand why I never told anyone. But I didn't have a diary. I had silence. I learned very quickly that in this house, feelings didn't matter. No one asked, "How are you doing?" No one noticed when my eyes stayed puffy for days. No one saw the change in my smile or how I avoided certain people. So I became very good at hiding. I hid my sadness behind a fake laugh. I hid my questions behind quietness. I hid my fear behind my chores. Sometimes I would lie in bed and whisper to myself in the dark, pretending I was writing letters to Mama. I imagined her reading them, crying, coming to get me. But of course no one came. I didn't even know where she was. I wish someone had noticed. I wish someone had looked past my silence and asked why I suddenly hated being alone, why I flinched when certain people came close, why I stopped hugging anyone. But they didn't. So the diary stayed unwritten, and the pain stayed inside me, quiet, heavy, and growing. 7 years is a long time to live in a house that doesn't feel like yours. By the time I turned 17, I had grown taller. My voice had softened. My laugh had almost disappeared. I was no longer the little girl who cried for Mama at night. I had learned how to keep my tears inside. Life in my aunt's house had become a routine. Wake up before dawn, fetch water, sweep the compound, wash dishes, go to school, come back, cook, clean, sleep. Over and over, like the days were folded copies of each other. Samira was now an adult. She had her own friends, her own life. The games had stopped years ago, but the memory of them stayed like an invisible scar. Sometimes I wouldn't think about it for weeks, but then a smell, a sound, or even a glance from someone could bring it all rushing back. I didn't have words for what I was feeling back then. I didn't even think of it as something that had a name. I only knew it had left something broken inside me. I often wondered about Mama. Was she okay? Did she think of me when she cooked? Did she imagine what I look like now? I wondered about Baba too. Did he feel guilty? Did he miss my brother and me? But I never asked because I didn't have the courage. And I feared the answers. Sometimes during school holidays, other children would go home to their families. They would return with new clothes, stories of trips and pictures of their smiling parents. I returned to chores and silence. 7 years is long enough for a child to forget the sound of home. But I never forgot the feeling of belonging somewhere, the feeling of being wanted, and I was starting to believe I might never feel it again. It was a normal afternoon when Baba arrived at my aunt's house. I wasn't expecting him. He stood in the doorway, looking older than I remembered. His eyes scanned me from head to toe like he was trying to recognize the little girl he once knew. "You're coming home," he said simply. No explanation, no long talk, just those 3 words. My heart leapt. Home, the word tasted sweet. I imagined Mama waiting for me, her arms open wide. I imagined sleeping in my own bed again, smelling the familiar scent of our house, hearing Baba tell stories like before. I quickly packed my few belongings, mostly old clothes and my schoolbooks. My brother packed his too. We didn't speak, but I knew we were both thinking the same thing. Finally, it's over. The journey felt long but full of hope. I stared out of the window, imagining the moment I would see Mama again. I wondered if she would cry. I was already holding back my own tears. When we reached the house, my heart pounded as I stepped inside. The walls looked familiar, but different. I searched for Mama's face, but she wasn't there. Baba cleared his throat. "You'll be staying here now," he said, his tone flat. A woman stepped forward. She was dressed neatly, her smile polite but distant. "This is my wife," Baba said. I froze. Wife? It hit me all at once. Mama wasn't here. She wasn't coming back. The woman, my father's second wife, showed me to a small room. It had a single bed, a cupboard, and a window facing the street. She spoke kindly, but I could feel the gap between us. This wasn't my mother. This wasn't my home. Living in Baba's new home was strange. His second wife wasn't unkind. She gave me food, asked about school, and told me what chores to do. But there was always a quiet distance between us. She wasn't my mother, and no matter how polite we were to each other, we both knew it. Baba was busy most of the time. Sometimes he came home late. Sometimes we barely spoke beyond greetings. I wanted to ask him about Mama, but I swallowed the question every time. I was afraid of what the answer might be. At night, when the house fell silent, my thoughts grew loud. It had been years since Samira's games, but the memories were like shadows that never left. I didn't think about them much during the day. I kept myself busy, but in the quiet darkness of my room, they crept back in. One night, I found myself doing the same things she had taught me. I didn't plan to. It was like my body remembered on its own. I felt a strange mix of shame and comfort. Afterward, the guilt hit me hard. I rushed to make wudu, prayed 2 rak'ah, and whispered, "Ya Allah, please forgive me. I don't know why I'm like this. I thought it would be a one-time mistake." But it wasn't. It began happening again, and again. Sometimes once a week, sometimes more. Each time I promised myself it would be the last. Each time I broke that promise, I became 2 people. The Amina everyone saw during the day, and the Amina who lived behind closed doors at night. And I feared that if anyone ever saw that second version of me, they would never look at me the same way again. The nights became my most dangerous time. During the day, I was busy with chores, schoolwork, and trying to adjust to life in Baba's new home. I played the role of the quiet, obedient daughter, never causing trouble, never asking for much. But when night came, the mask slipped. I would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling my thoughts swirl like a storm. Memories of Samira would come uninvited. Her face, her voice, the things she did. Sometimes it felt like I could hear her whispering in my ear again, and then, almost without thinking, I would repeat the acts she had taught me years ago. Each time it felt like I was sinking deeper into something I couldn't escape. There was a strange comfort in it, a false warmth, but it was always followed by an icy wave of shame. I would jump out of bed, rush to the bathroom and make wudu. Sometimes I cried quietly while washing my hands. Then I would pray 2 rak'ah, my voice shaking as I whispered, "Ya Allah, I don't want to do this. Please help me stop." But the cycle kept repeating. It didn't happen every night, but it happened often enough for me to feel trapped. I tried distracting myself by reading or reciting Quran before bed. Sometimes it worked. Other times, the temptation was too strong. I hated myself for it. I thought about telling someone, maybe an older sister figure at the masjid or a close friend, but the fear of their reaction kept my mouth shut. What if they thought I was dirty? What if they told others? So I stayed silent. It was my secret life, a hidden war I fought alone. And though I smiled during the day, I was losing the battle every night. One Friday afternoon, I went to the masjid for Jumu'ah prayer. I sat in the women's section, feeling tired from the week. My mind was clouded, but I listened anyway. The Imam began speaking about something I had never heard explained like this before. He said, every part of the body can commit zina. The eyes, the ears, the hands, the thoughts, even if the private parts do not confirm it. The words hit me like a sudden wind. He spoke about guarding our thoughts, lowering our gaze, and protecting ourselves even in private. He said that Allah knows what we hide in our hearts, and that true repentance means closing the doors that lead to sin. I shifted uncomfortably on the carpet. It felt as if the Imam could see right through me, as if the entire khutbah was written for me alone. After the prayer, I walked home in silence. My mind replayed his words over and over. Zina of the eyes, zina of the thoughts. When I reached home, I went straight to my room. I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself, really looked. My reflection stared back, but I didn't recognize her. I saw a girl carrying secrets no one knew, a girl who prayed and smiled by day, but battled shadows by night. I whispered to myself, "What happened to you, Amina? When did you become this person?" Tears filled my eyes. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, remembering the little girl I once was, the one who thought she could be anything, the one who didn't carry this guilt. That night, I prayed with more sincerity than I had in a long time. I begged Allah to help me fight what I couldn't fight alone, and for the first time in years, I felt a tiny spark of hope. The Imam's khutbah stayed with me for days. His words were like an echo in my mind that wouldn't fade, but instead of feeling free, I felt heavier. One night, lying in bed, I whispered to myself, what if I'm broken? What if I was made wrong? What if I was beyond repair? It scared me to think that maybe this was who I would always be, someone trapped in a cycle of shame and sin, someone who prayed for forgiveness but kept falling anyway. I tried to push the thought away, but it clung to me. The more I thought about it, the more I believed it. Then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I was sitting in the schoolyard when a girl from my class sat beside me. She was quiet for a while, then she said, "Can I tell you something?" She told me about something that had happened to her when she was a child, something done by someone in her own family. Her voice shook as she spoke. She didn't give many details, but I understood enough. I froze. It was like hearing my own story come from someone else's mouth. And then it hit me. I wasn't the only one. I wasn't the only girl who had been hurt by someone she trusted. I wasn't the only one carrying memories she never asked for. For the first time, a tiny crack appeared in the wall of self-blame I had built. Maybe I wasn't broken. Maybe I wasn't made wrong. Maybe something wrong had been done to me. That night, I cried differently. Not from guilt this time, but from relief. Because for the first time, I realized my pain had a reason. I wasn't the only one. For a while after talking to that girl in school, I felt lighter. It was like I had been holding my breath for years and finally let out a sigh. Knowing I wasn't the only one made my shame feel a little smaller. But healing isn't a straight line. One evening, I was alone in my room. The house was quiet. My mind began to wander, the way it always did when there was nothing to distract me. Memories of Samira crept back in, not just her face, but the exact moments, the things she did, the way she whispered to me. It felt so real, as if it was happening all over again. Before I knew it, I was doing the same acts she had taught me years ago. Afterwards, I sat frozen on my bed, staring at my hands. Shame rushed in like a flood. I couldn't believe it. I thought I'd moved forward. I thought I was past this. I rushed to make wudu and prayed 2 rak'ah. I whispered, "Ya Allah, please forgive me. Please, I don't want this anymore." My voice shook, my forehead pressed into the mat. But the truth was painful. I still wanted it sometimes. Not because it was good, but because it was familiar. It was the only kind of comfort my body knew from my childhood. It scared me to realize how easy it was to fall again. It wasn't about strength or weakness in that moment. It was about old wounds that still bled when I thought they had healed. The next morning, I tried to act normal. I did my chores, greeted Baba's wife politely, went to school. But inside, I carried the guilt like a heavy stone in my chest. I didn't tell anyone. How could I? I was supposed to be moving forward. I was supposed to be healing. But I had fallen. Again. It started with curiosity. I had fallen again, and part of me wanted to understand why I couldn't stop. I thought maybe if I looked into it, I could figure out my feelings. One night, when everyone was asleep, I reached for my phone. My heart was racing before I even unlocked it. I searched for something I knew was wrong. Videos that I had only heard about in whispers. At first, it was just one clip. I told myself it was only to see, only to understand. But it didn't stop there. The next night, I looked again. This time, longer. The images burned into my mind, and I carried them around the next day like invisible stains. Something shifted inside me. The temptation wasn't just in my mind anymore. It was on my screen. And unlike memories, I could choose when to watch it. That made it worse. It became my secret trap. I told myself I would only watch once in a while, but once in a while quickly became often. And then came the guilt. Heavy, suffocating guilt. After every time, I would slam my phone down, ashamed. I would rush to make wudu, feeling like I had dirtied my soul. In sujood, I whispered over and over, "Ya Allah, I hate this. Please help me stop, please." But as much as I hated it, part of me kept going back. The screen became my escape when I felt lonely, when I felt unwanted, when I felt like no one truly saw me. It wasn't just a habit now. It was a chain, and I didn't know how to break it. I started avoiding my own reflection in the mirror. When I looked into my eyes, I didn't see innocence anymore. I saw someone trapped. And the scariest part, I wasn't sure I wanted to let go. When a marriage proposal came, I saw it as my chance to finally be free. I told myself, once I am married, I won't have to fight this anymore. I'll have someone to love me, someone to hold me. This will all go away. The preparations were a blur. My family said good things about him. He was kind, religious, and came from a respectable home. I prayed istikhara, convincing myself that this was Allah's way of giving me a new beginning. On my wedding day, I smiled for the pictures. I laughed when people congratulated me. Inside, I was whispering to myself, "This is it, Amina. You're starting over. No more secrets." The first weeks of marriage were gentle. My husband treated me with care, but it didn't take long to notice that something felt missing. Some nights we were close, but I still felt alone. My body was there, but my mind was somewhere else. Sometimes I even thought about the images I had seen or the memories from my past. I hated that they were still there, still lurking in the shadows. I thought marriage would erase them. Instead, they followed me right into my new home. I didn't tell my husband. I couldn't. How do you explain that even in his arms you sometimes feel like you're in a different place? How do you tell someone that your past has built walls inside you that they can't see? So I kept silent. I smiled, I cooked, I played the role of the happy wife. But inside I was terrified that nothing had really changed. And I was right, because the nights came again, the same temptations came again. And one evening when my husband was asleep, I reached for my phone. I told myself it would be the last time, but deep down I knew. I was lying to myself. During the day, I was the perfect wife. I cooked my husband's favorite meals. I kept the house tidy. I laughed at his jokes. I welcomed guests warmly. On the outside, I looked like a woman whose life had fallen perfectly into place. But at night, the other Amina returned. When my husband fell asleep, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling. The familiar pull, the temptation, would whisper to me. It was as if the darkness itself invited me back into my secret world. I reached for my phone, knowing exactly where to go, One video turned into two, two turned into more, and before I knew it, I was deep in the same pit I thought marriage would save me from. Sometimes I told myself, just tonight, tomorrow will be different, but tomorrow never was. Afterward, I would slip quietly into the bathroom, wash my face and stare into the mirror. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, tired eyes, a guilty heart, a soul weighed down by secrets. Then I would return to bed, lie beside my husband, and pretend to sleep. I hated the double life. I hated how I could laugh with him in the morning, knowing what I had done the night before. I hated the fear of what would happen if he ever found out. But more than that, I hated that a part of me didn't want to let go. The habit had become a comfort, twisted and dangerous, but familiar. During the day, I told myself I was fine. At night, I proved myself wrong. It was a strange prison. The door was unlocked, but I didn't know how to walk out. And even though my husband never knew, I knew. And that was enough to make me feel like a liar every single day. It was a night like many others. My husband was asleep. The house was quiet. The temptation was whispering again. I told myself I would just check one video, then another, and another. Time slipped by like water through my fingers. By the time I stopped, I felt hollow. I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone in my hand, my heart pounding. My chest felt tight, like it was holding back a scream. The shame was unbearable. Without thinking, I got up and made wudu. My hands shook as I washed them. My face felt hot, as if the water couldn't cool the fire of guilt inside me. I spread my prayer mat on the floor. My knees felt weak as I stood for Salah. I whispered Allahu Akbar, but my voice cracked. I didn't rush the prayer. I didn't follow the motions just to finish. I stood there, frozen, feeling Allah's presence like I hadn't in years. When I went into sujood, the tears came. At first, they were quiet, just drops on the mat, but soon I was sobbing, my forehead pressed into the floor, my heart spilling every secret. Ya Allah, I'm tired. I don't want this anymore. Please take it away from me. Please. I whispered Astaghfirullah over and over. But this time it wasn't just words. It wasn't something I said because I knew I should. It was a cry from my soul. I stayed in sujood for a long time, my body trembling. It felt like the mat was holding me together, like if I let go, I might fall apart completely. When I finally sat back, my cheeks were wet, my heart pounding. But something was different. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. I knew the struggle wasn't over. I knew I might fall again. But I also knew I had just truly turned to Allah, not just with my lips, but with my heart. And that night, for the first time in a long time, I slept in peace. After that night, something inside me shifted. I didn't wake up the next morning completely free from temptation, but I woke up with a new habit, talking to Allah in the dark. Every night before sleeping, I would switch off the lights, sit on my prayer mat, and speak to him as if he was right in front of me. There was no fancy Arabic, no memorized phrases, just my own words, raw and unpolished. Ya Allah, it's me again. I'm still struggling, I'm still scared, but I know you're listening. Some nights my dua was full of tears. Other nights it was just quiet whispers. Sometimes I would tell him about my day, about my fears, about the memories that still haunted me. I told him things I couldn't tell anyone else. I told him about the shame I still carried, the times I almost fell, the moments I wanted to give up. I told him how I wished I could be pure again, like the little girl I was before everything changed. And in those moments, I felt something I hadn't felt in years, closeness. I started to realize that even when I sinned, even when I felt furthest from him, Allah had never stopped watching me, never stopped waiting for me to turn back. Sometimes I still fell. Some nights the temptation still won. But now, I didn't run away from Allah afterwards. I ran to him. I would go straight to my mat and whisper, Ya Allah, I'm sorry, I'm trying. Please don't leave me. It didn't erase my struggle, but it changed the way I fought it. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. And little by little I began to believe that maybe, just maybe, Allah hadn't given up on me yet. It started with a plain brown notebook I bought from a small stationery shop near the market. There was nothing special about it, no lock, no fancy cover, just 100 blank pages waiting to be filled. I didn't buy it with a plan. I only knew I needed somewhere to put the words I couldn't say out loud. That night, after everyone was asleep, I sat on my bed with the notebook in my lap. At first I just wrote the date. Then I began to write the same words I had been whispering in my prayers. Ya Allah, I'm still struggling. I'm still falling, please help me. Once I started, I couldn't stop. I wrote about my days, my memories, my shame. I wrote about Samira, her face, her voice, the way she changed my life without asking. I wrote about the loneliness in my aunt's house, the hunger that was deeper than food, the years that passed without Mama. Sometimes I wrote letters I would never send, to Mama, to Baba, even to Samira. The pages became a mirror. They didn't judge me. They didn't tell me I was wrong to feel what I felt. They simply held my truth. There were nights when I would write until my hand ached. Other nights, I would only manage a few sentences before the tears blurred my vision. Some entries were full of hope. I think I'm getting better. I think I can fight this. Others were heavy with despair. I fell again. I hate myself. I don't think I can change. But whether the words were light or dark, I kept writing. It became my secret ritual. Just like my nightly dua, the journal became part of my survival. Because when you carry a burden for so long, even writing it down can feel like lifting a little of its weight. And somehow, even on the nights I felt most distant from Allah, writing reminded me that I was still here, still trying. Even with my prayers and my journal, there was still a voice I couldn't escape. It wasn't loud, but it was constant, a whisper in the back of my mind, always ready to speak when I was weak. You'll never change. You're too dirty for Allah to forgive you. You're wasting your time trying. Some days I almost believed it. The voice was clever. It spoke in my own thoughts, so it sounded like the truth. It reminded me of every failure, every night I had fallen back into temptation. It told me I was a hypocrite for praying after sinning, that I was only pretending to want change. I tried to fight it. Sometimes I would whisper back, "No, Allah is most merciful. Allah forgives all sins." One afternoon, while scrolling through my phone, I came across an ayah I had never really noticed before. Do not despair of the mercy of Allah. Indeed, Allah forgives all sins. All sins. The word struck me like a beam of light in a dark room. If Allah Himself said all, then who was I to say I was beyond saving? That night the voice came again, "You'll never be clean." But this time I had an answer. Allah can clean me. Allah can change me. And He hasn't given up on me yet. The voice didn't disappear overnight. It still tried to creep in, especially after I stumbled. But now I had something stronger than it. The words of my Creator. And even when the whisper returned, I reminded myself, the voice in my head was not the voice of Allah. It was the voice of my wounds. When Ramadan came, I was sure it would be my breakthrough. I told myself, this is the month I will finally stop. This is when I'll be closest to Allah. The temptation won't touch me now. The first few days were good. I was busy with fasting, Taraweeh, and Quran recitation. My heart felt lighter. The hunger during the day reminded me of my purpose, and I thought maybe this time I could win. But temptation doesn't care about the month. It doesn't care about fasting or the blessings in the air. It came knocking at my heart even harder than before. The first time it happened, I convinced myself it was just weakness from fasting, nothing serious. I told myself I would recover the next day, but the next day came, and I fell again. It broke me. How could I do this in Ramadan? How could I stain this holy month with the same sins I had been trying to leave behind? One night, after Taraweeh, I sat alone on my mat. The house was quiet. My hands trembled as I held them up in dua. Ya Allah, I'm ashamed. I don't even know if I deserve to keep fasting. I keep making promises I can't keep. Tears streamed down my face. I thought about the angels writing my deeds, about Allah seeing me, about Laylatul Qadr approaching. I tried harder after that night. I avoided being alone. I read more Quran. I fasted not just with my stomach, but with my eyes and my hands. But some nights I still fell. And each time I did, it felt worse than the last. By the end of Ramadan, I didn't feel like I had won anything. I didn't feel like the victorious believer I wanted to be. I felt like a soldier who had been in a battle and barely made it out standing. And yet, I was still standing. It was a quiet night. My husband was asleep, the house was still, and my phone was just within reach. I had been fighting temptation all evening. I tried reading Quran earlier, tried distracting myself with chores, but the urge wouldn't go away. It was like a voice inside me was saying, just once, it won't matter. Finally, I reached for my phone. My heart was already racing, my fingers knew exactly where to go. But instead of opening what I meant to, I accidentally tapped my Quran app. The screen lit up with a verse I hadn't been reading before, as if it had been waiting for me, and He is with you wherever you are. I froze. My hand went still. My breath caught in my throat. It was as if Allah Himself was speaking to me in that exact moment, reminding me that He was watching, not with anger alone, but with the presence of someone who had never left me. I couldn't move for a few seconds, my eyes blurred with tears. My phone slipped from my hand and landed softly on the bed. I whispered, "Ya Allah, you really are here." The temptation was still there, but it felt different now, smaller, weaker. I picked up my phone again, but this time I opened the Quran and started reading the surah in front of me. My heartbeat began to slow. The urge started to fade. That night, I didn't fall. It might seem like a small victory, but for me, it was proof that Allah was closer to me than my own desires. Sometimes, all it takes is one reminder, one verse, to pull you back from the edge. And that night, that verse saved me. I had managed to stay away from temptation for a few days, but that evening, I had fallen again. I didn't even have the strength to make a long dua. I just lay on my side, staring at the wall until sleep pulled me under, and then I dreamed. I was standing in a wide, endless field. The air was heavy and the sky was grey. Far ahead of me there was a light, warm, glowing and beautiful. People were walking toward it, their faces calm and full of hope. I tried to move toward them, but my feet wouldn't budge. It was like they were rooted in the ground. I struggled, pulled, tried to take a step, but nothing happened. Then I felt it, a presence behind me. Cold, dark. I didn't want to turn around, but something made me look. It was a shadow, no face, no shape, just darkness. And it spoke in a voice that chilled me to my bones. "You can't go there," it said. "You belong to me."